It is the worst humanitarian crisis of our generation, bar none.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that shelter is one of the most critical needs in our world today. So there are more people displaced today than in any other time in recorded history. It's over 80 million people who are displaced in our world, and that number is growing.
Hey everybody, I'm sitting here with Kerri, who is the president of ShelterBox USA, and the reason we're here today is to share a little bit about what we've been doing with ShelterBox, and so they can actually share some of the spotlight and tell the world kind of how their program works, what they've been doing, and how we've been working with them. And so in that process, what we've done is every time we close a property, we actually fund the tents that they use for their international outreach for supplying shelter to people in areas that they can't afford it or places that have been decimated by natural disasters. So in that, what we're going to do is we're just kind of go through a bunch of stuff and give Kerri an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what they're doing and just everything that we can do to get involved. So Kerri, obviously there's a lot of things going on with ShelterBox, and what we really want to do is have the opportunity to explain ShelterBox a little bit more and show people how beneficial this is and kind of where the whole idea came from. Mm-hmm. So if it's okay, could you just kind of take us through a little bit about where this started and how it began and kind of go from there?
Sure. So ShelterBox is an international nonprofit organization, and we're a humanitarian organization that exists to provide emergency shelter and life-saving supplies to people who've lost everything in both natural disaster and conflict situations. So what you see, and you've seen this across California, right? You've seen earthquakes,
right.
You see fires, you've seen mudslides,
right.
Even here in our own community, and people can lose everything in an instant.
Yeah.
So the model was really, when we were founded, what are the basic things that you need to survive if you lost everything
Sure.
in a disaster? And the basic needs we all have are food, water, and shelter. ShelterBox really focuses on the provision of basic shelter and then household supplies when you've lost everything. So the concept really focuses first on the center of gravity, which is your shelter. A
right.
place
yeah.
to live, a place to call home.
Sure.
So it is a family emergency tent. It is made for humanitarian purposes, and it will actually be a place for weeks or even months that a family will live in when they've lost their home. Now, in addition to that, in disaster situations, you often see lack of power. So there are collapsible solar lights that are included inside the box.
That's neat.
This provides, obviously, light to do basic tasks, but also, especially in camp situations where you worry about gender-based violence, you have a light to keep you
safety,
safe
yeah.
when you're going out to use, obviously the facilities at night. You need to go to the bathroom, you
yeah.
need to get to work. So then what you often see in disaster situations is contamination of the water source.
Okay.
So essential for life, you need to purify water quickly. So we include a water purification unit as well as a water container to store purified water. The box is often used to store water as well. So then there are 8 organizations that are bringing in food. You need something to cook it in.
Right.
So really basic stainless steel equipment, so you can cook the food, you can prepare a meal and eat the food for your
right.
family. Then the other things that we include, so you have blankets, ground mats. We put a toolkit inside. Often in disasters, you see people digging out with their bare hands. So gloves,
yeah.
a handsaw, basic tools and instruments to start with that repair process.
Very
Mosquito nets. And then we also include a children's activity set. When you've lost infrastructure, you've often lost school, something to keep kids busy. So one box will serve one family, and this can serve up to 10 people. Now, to give you some perspective on how this has actually been used in practice, the Haiti earthquake in 2010.
Haiti, yeah.
1.5 million people lost their homes in an instant. Wow. And so ShelterBox provided about 1/3 of all tented shelter that went into Haiti.
1/3?
People lived in those for months. Some of them lived in it for years. And so this really serves an immediate need. Very few organizations going in the aftermath of disaster or conflict, providing emergency shelter is critical.
Wow.
Yeah, for getting families back on their feet again. And so that's what we do. Sole focus is shelter and then emergency supplies and equipment.
And that was just Haiti, but I mean, what about the stuff like, Hawaii? They just had the thing with the volcano, and that was decimating just neighborhoods, which before that, they lived on a luxury tropical island, and 2 days later, they lived in nothing. Stuff like that, Hurricane Katrina, all the hurricanes that hit us, but not only that, but also stuff that's going on in Uganda and everything else.
Right.
How many countries are you guys in? Because I know that ShelterBox now has grown grown from being a simple organization to one that's internationally based
Right.
through Rotary. How far does it span now? How wide is the reach?
So I'm happy you mentioned Rotary. So ShelterBox is the international project partner of Rotary International, and Rotarians on the ground really help us scale our response.
Right.
We've responded now to over 300 emergencies. We've sheltered well over 1.3 million people, and we've responded in over 100 countries, including the United States, and it to a whole host of things. To your point, so volcanoes to earthquakes, hurricanes, conflict situations. The longest response in our history has been in Syria to the Syrian refugee crisis.
And how long has that been total? Like, how's the?
We've been responding since 2012.
My goodness.
So it is the worst humanitarian crisis of our generation, bar none.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that shelter is one of the most critical needs in our world today. So there are more people displaced today than in any other time in recorded history. It's over 80 million people who are displaced in our world, and that number is growing.
That's insane.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Well, so this I know if we got big box here, we have smaller boxes here. This obviously hosts the tent, and the tent, I don't think the tent is gigantic. Just for everybody who doesn't know, it's a 10-person human tent. It is really big. It is the size of many small houses in foreign countries. But how easy are these to transport to those areas? I mean, because you see them in the pictures I've seen, a guy's got it like on his back as like a backpack wading through the water. I mean, how easy are these to get there, which I think is really important.
So ShelterBox is actually a model of prepositioning. So we pre-position different types of shelter and supplies all over the world, from the international humanitarian city in Dubai to Panama. And so, for instance, we really try to pre-position what items are most needed in a region.
Okay.
And we try to draw down on inventory that we have that's local when something happens. So, for instance, in Panama last year, we had thousands of shelter kits pre-positioned. Those were deployed in hurricanes Irma and Maria. Those went to the Caribbean. So we do try really to pre-position accordingly across the world. But the logistics that you mentioned are particularly challenging for an organization like ours. One of the things that we do when we deploy these, we don't just ship them in, hope they get to where they need to go. We actually hand deliver the aid that we provide, and we do that through civilian volunteers. So we have a disaster relief training facility. We have people like yourself who would apply to become a first responder. It takes about 6 months to go through the program, and 1 in 30 people make it through and become a responder.
Oh, wow.
They continuously train like reservists every month, and they have to deploy at least one time per year for a minimum of 2 weeks. So we deploy in teams, and so to answer your question, at any given time, we could be deployed and responding in a dozen or more different countries. And we do that and scale our response through the volunteers that we have. And so we have a large ops team, but we also have hundreds of volunteers that make this work possible around the world.
That's amazing. And to be fair, this seems like a lot. I mean, in the world of nonprofits and trying to get things done, there's such big problems like, Save the Whales, which has been a problem as long as I've been born. I mean, saving the whales, but this is a problem that's very easily solved with one bucket, right? So one bucket equals one person solved, at least for the time being. How easy is it to fund something like this? I mean, these from the math that I've done and what we've been doing with you guys, it's not that much for me to figure out how to calculate this into my business and make the part of our business that we want to be very functional for the rest of the world work. So can you kind of give people an idea of what the investments and how to get involved in something like this? Because what if they can't volunteer? And especially if 1 in 30 make it, more people are out there who would love to benefit from being able to do something in their own country.
So I always say everyone has something to contribute,
right,
to making the world a better place. What you've done is extraordinary. I mean, you've built philanthropy into your business, and it's part of everything that you do. And so people are buying houses, but they're giving homes to people
100%.
who've lost everything, and that's really incredible. In disaster relief and what we do, people tend to think about us on the worst day ever, right? And so it's a Haiti, it's a tsunami in Japan, but you can't do in disasters what you're not doing every day. And for us to be able to do this work, have trained responders, have pre-positioned aid, we have to have support on a continuous basis, which is really challenging for our organization. We definitely see surges in donations when something bad happens, but that you're helping to build visibility and awareness and helping build support for the work is really what enables us to do this. So I think there are so many ways that people could contribute. A shelter box is about $1,000 delivered to a family. We have shelter kits that are about $100
Right.
that can put a roof on a home that's been damaged or destroyed in a hurricane. And there's a variety of different things that we support. So obviously we put solar lights. So sometimes people want to help donate
to
donate solar lights. So
And how much is a solar light, just so they know?
it's roughly about $15.
$15. So I mean, not that this is a telethon, but $15 you can support something, even a part of it, so you know exactly what it's going towards. And I think the biggest thing for me is through the research that I did, and it took me, to be fair to everybody else watching, it took me a long time to figure out how I would create philanthropy with my business, because I had the same problem most do, is that the problem always seems too big. It always seems like, I'm putting a dollar in a bucket that just never ends. This, and I'm not going to pick on Save the Wheels. I believe in all of that, but you never see an end to the problem.
Right.
It's just a constant, never-ending thing. Whereas if you were able to say, hey, I'm going to donate this much money, this is exactly what it's going towards. It's very easy then for them to wrap their head around how to solve that problem, which I think is a big deal. So $1,500 would do everything, but you can also break it down from as little as probably $10 to $15 all the way up into the whole bucket.
Right.
And that would solve the entire problems of at least one family. It could be a family as close as New Orleans.
Right.
It could be somebody it could be in Syria, it could be in the Sudan, but it could be someone very close to you.
Could be in Houston, right?
It could be your neighborhood next.
Right.
I mean, we live in California. Luckily, we haven't had the big one, but let's be honest. Everything is subject to change, and these things could be there for us.
Right. So Brian, on our website, shelterboxusa.org, there are so many ways to get involved. So
Great.
we have an ambassador program as well in the U.S. We have a gift catalog so people can look
Great.
people can become sustaining givers. Some people donate their birthday on Facebook. There are so many different ways to be involved in
Fantastic.
making this a reality. But the critical thing for us is that people participate like you. We couldn't
Amazing.
do it without the efforts that you do, and it's really extraordinary.
And I
So
appreciate
thank
that. And we are actually going to make sure all these links will be on this video, on our website, on our social media. This is not a secret we're trying to hold to ourselves. We're trying to get the energy out there so people understand this is not that hard to put into your business and put in your daily lives and actually make a difference. So all those links will be available for you. If you want more information, you can ask it of us, and we'll be happy to deliver it to you. And we will even set up our own opportunity for people to work through us to help also fund and donate towards your guys' program. So the only other thing that we haven't talked about is the fact that ShelterBox, and I only became aware of ShelterBox in January of this year. But in that amount of time, I set up Google Alerts on my computer, so I knew what was going on with the company I'm working with. And in there, it just said randomly, ShelterBox gets nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So incredible privilege for the organization. There are millions of nonprofit organizations in the world. There are roughly about 100, from what I understand, that get nominated each year for the Nobel Peace Prize. And ShelterBox was nominated in 2018
Amazing.
for our work building peace. And that's specifically really in recognition of the work that we do in conflict situations,
Right.
like in Syria. And so really shelter is something that unites us all.
Right.
We all need a place to call
100%.
home. And not only do we work in the disaster situations we mentioned,
Right.
but we also work in these really tough situations, conflict situations where families have lost everything.
Yeah.
And they have no place to call home.
Yeah.
And so working with them just to provide basic tools, equipment, shelter-based supplies to keep them alive who are caught in the worst conflict, like in Syria of our generation. So it's just a privilege for ShelterBox to be nominated.
Very cool. And I think it's important to put this out there, is that it's really hard. I mean, we live in Southern California. It's very complicated to see how far these problems go from behind a TV screen. So we can see so much of it from a distance, but until you actually start getting involved in it and start trying to dig, you don't really realize how far it goes and how close those problems are to home. As easy as Texas, New Orleans, Florida, Hawaii, that are really close to us. So I think the coolest part of me saying that is that before January, I hadn't heard of ShelterBox. And in that amount of time, I mean, they've been working forever, but they got a Nobel, they're nominated for a Nobel Prize. I think there's something to be said for just subtle work, doing something that's very important, not trying to call attention to yourself in the process, just moving forward and doing the right thing over and over again, and just watching how everyone starts to pay attention. And I mean pay attention for a sense of accolades, but pay attention because it works.
Right.
I think that's very cool. So listen, I appreciate all the time we've had with you today. It's been really awesome. If anybody would like any additional information or resources, you can collect them at the video, and the links we'll have below in our social media. And you can always obviously reach out to our office, and we'll give you direct access as to where to donate. where to help take part if you'd like to, and any other information you might want to get, as well as news updates on the success of receiving a Nobel Peace Prize. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good day.